Hello, spooky friends. I'm John, and this is the second episode of Dairyland Frights, the paranormal podcast that covers everything spooky, creepy, and mysterious in the Midwest. For now, I'm joined by my two co-hosts, Megan and Brooke. How you doing, Brooke?
I am doing good. I'm excited to talk about some spooky stuff today.
Nice. Megan, how you doing?
I'm also super excited. I did a lot of research for this podcast and I learned some pretty crazy stories, which I'm excited to share.
Yes. So our scary topic for this episode is the mysterious summer wind. We got a lot of great stuff about it. Being that it's in the Midwest, we found out a lot more information than other podcasts, so you're going to love it. But first, before we get to summer wind, I want to talk to you about the Bunk Bed from Hell.
Yes, been waiting for this story.
Yes. So, Megan and Brooke, have you ever been in a bunk bed or used a bunk bed or?
I have many times being up north in Wisconsin. We've used bunk beds because the space is limited at some up north cabins. But I can't say that I've ever been in a haunted bunk bed.
A haunted bunk bed. How about you, Megan?
It's funny that you say that, Brooke, is the only time I've also been in a bunk bed is in a cabin going camping up north. So we have that shared experience.
Yeah, it's just the thing to do.
So I don't know if you both knew this, but the devil is in Horicon, Wisconsin.
Wow.
Yes. So according to this website, Wisconsin Frights, not Dairyland Frights, so it's about this family called the Talaman family or Talaman family. If I'm mispronouncing it, I'm sorry. Just let me know. They bought a bunk bed back in 1987 from a secondhand store. And as soon as they got it home, strange things started to happen almost immediately. So like the radio in the kids' room began switching stations on its own. The children saw an ugly old woman in their room with long black hair and a glow, and her eyes glue like fire. Doors banged open and shut. A chair rocked by itself. Disembodied voices were heard throughout the house and the room, and it was just really strange because, like I said, it just started immediately that they put this bunk bed in, and this is really spooky. So the kids claimed that these red eyes would stare at them from the corner of their room. So they would like wake up and look, and then these red eyes would just peer out.
Ooh.
I don't know about you.
Heck no.
What do you guys think about that so far? That's pretty scary for a little kid. By the way, these kids one was like 8, one was like 10. So it's pretty young, right?
That is terrifying.
That would scar me as a kid.
So just a side note really quick. I went down a rabbit hole trying to find where they got this bunk bed from. Because remember, I told you it's from a secondhand store. So I tried to find out, did they get it from like a satanic cult? Like it was a bunk bed in a satanic cult's house? Nope. I emailed the Horicon police. No one got back to me, so it's kind of lame. So both dead ends. But moving forward, and this is great. The family was at day and night. It was, like I said, doors banging, chairs rocking, eyes peering out from corners of rooms. Especially like I said, mostly in the kids' room. So what do you do? Obviously, when you have the devil possessing your bunk bed, well, you call a priest, right? So what they did, you call a priest. So they called Pastor Reverend Wayne Dobritz. Again, sorry if I mispronounce it. This is great. So he did a walk through the house. And what do you think he said, Megan and Brooke?
I don't know.
God, I'm not even sure.
What did he say?
The devil is in the house.
Oh.
So the house is possessed by the devil, obviously, right? Come on.
What else would you think?
Yeah. So so he did an exorcism. One thing it does not mention if it worked or not, but I don't think it worked because a few days later, I have an exact date, by the way, January 11th, 1988, A relative of the family spent the evening at the house, helping Debbie, who was the mother, with the children, putting the kids, to bed and everything. And he was a skeptic. Boo. And what he
Ooh.
saw, though, he was a believer that night because that night a horrific figure materialized in the bedroom. Like I said, when he was putting the children to bed.
Oh,
So
God.
that's gonna change your mind pretty damn quick. And it
Yep.
wasn't the old woman. It didn't say what it was. All it said was in the article that it was just this scary figure that just suddenly just appeared in the room. So let's get to the fun stuff, though. This is Wisconsin, people. Okay, so if you're not familiar with Wisconsin, or if you don't live in Wisconsin, you'll be like, oh, that's kind of weird. But if you live in Wisconsin, this will be like, yeah. So this drunk guy shows up.
Yep, that's checking out already.
Right? With a Bible. And he tried to get into the house to perform an exorcism. For some weird reason, they let him in, and the exorcism didn't work. Well,
oh, shocker. Wow.
He probably couldn't pronounce his Latin words well enough. He's slurring them.
So imagine that. You're just sitting at home, there's a knock on the door, and there's this drunk guy shows up and says, hey, I can help you with this. Let me try you. Oh, sure, come on in. So
that sounds like an average, just an average
Wisconsin
Tuesday.
Hospitality.
Yeah, right. The other quick things with this too, I didn't put down here, but I remember people were saying that they would see the snowblower like go by itself and snow blow the driveway. So they had a possessed snowblower
Thanks.
too.
Oh, it's at least a helpful ghost.
Helpful, yeah.
Yeah. So hey, it's a helpful demon. Like, look at this snow. I gotta help out. The other thing is people would show up randomly and just knock on their door and be like, hey, can I see the devil? Can you show me the devil? People would want to sleep on the bunk bed too. Yeah.
Wow.
So, come on in. Wisconsin Hospitality. Come on in, Derry.
I don't know if either of you are like me, but the devil says, get the F out, I'm out. How about you two? If somebody says like, get out, like a demon voice,
oh yeah,
would you get out?
Oh yeah, I'm out of there in a second.
Yeah, not be looking back.
No,
okay,
me neither.
So check this out. The Talaman family didn't get out until 9 months later.
That's impressive, honestly.
Yeah. So they left in the middle of winter, in the dead of winter. And again, if you're in Wisconsin, in the middle of the dead of winter, it's creepy as hell anyway, because it's just cold and it's dark and it's just, just eerie, right? And they just ran out of the house. They left everything and they just took off.
Man.
So the thing is, Unsolved Mysteries. I know it's making a comeback on Netflix.
Love Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah. Yeah. So they did one of their first episodes. It was season 1, first season, episode 3, which I watched on Netflix. Typical 80s horror, kind of. Like, it wasn't really scary, it's more you laugh at it. You got to go on YouTube. I was actually able to circumvent it and get for free, but I do think you have to pay for it. But it's worth it, trust me. And they did the house as a Halloween episode, obviously, on October 26, 1988.
Oh, perfect.
So it's an interesting thing you can check out. I just found the whole thing really funny, but here's the even creepy and spooky part, okay? Nobody knows where these bunk beds are. No one has an idea where they are, okay?
It's interesting.
No one knows if they've been destroyed or they're in the, sheriff's department or someone bought it. So what do you think about that? Let me ask both of you, Brooke first, where do you think those bunk beds are?
Well, I'm a little worried that they're in like my parents' cabin or something. Or that they will be someday.
Yeah. Right. How about you, Megan? Where do you think they are?
One thing I'm wondering is, instead of leaving your house, wouldn't you think that you would get rid of the bunk bed first? Like, maybe, this is what, sparked all of this crazy stuff that happened. Maybe we should, burn it or throw it on the side of the road.
That's true.
Exactly.
I hope it's not in another secondhand store. Be careful with what you're buying from Goodwill.
Yeah. So I was convinced that Ed and Lorraine Warren, and if you're familiar with the paranormal or have watched any of the Conjuring movies, you know who they are. They're the big demon players in the field, or were, because they've passed. I swear to God that they must have bought it, but no news on that. And then I thought Ghost Adventures, Baggins, I thought he bought it. No information about that either. So I don't know where they are.
Very interesting.
Yeah, so be careful. Now, here's the thing. I went on Zillow. I looked at the house. Basically, nothing's happened. It's kind of lame. Everyone just says, hey, this was a house that was haunted. Everybody's like, no, I'm fine. Nothing has happened since then. The bunk beds, I guess, are gone.
Yeah, it's all about the bunk beds.
Yeah, there's been nothing about it. It's just if you go on Zillow, it's just a regular old Wisconsin home, nothing special. So that's it from the Bunk Bed from Hell. What did you think of that?
It's very interesting. I never would have thought of a cursed object being a bunk bed.
Yes.
I'm wondering what was haunted about it. If it was someone like putting a curse on it when they were making it, or if it was like a haunted tree that it was made out of.
Yeah, that's what Megan said, right? Did you say that, Megan?
Yeah, I did. I was thinking about that same thing. It's like, did it come that way, or did something attach itself to the bunk bed? It's hard to know.
Yeah.
I just picture like this Satanist coming into the secondhand store and they're unloading the bunk bed. And, they have this creepy dark robes on and this creepy makeup. And they're like, hey, excuse me, can I give you this bunk bed?
Right.
Sell it for a good price.
Yeah, here you go. Sure, what the hell? Okay, so we're going to get on to Summerwind here in just a second. Next episode, if we have time, I even have a better one. The toaster that was possessed by the devil.
Wow.
You thought the bunk bed was bad. The toaster is even worse.
The toaster is even worse.
Can't wait, John.
Anyway, so let's get on to our main topic. We're going to start with Brooke. And like I said, our main topic is the mysterious Summerwind. So Brooke, take it away.
Yes, I'm so excited. Summerwind is kind of like, if you live in Wisconsin and you're into the paranormal, like everyone has heard of it, but I feel like I had never really looked into it much. I knew about the first story we'll talk about, a certain person maybe firing a gun at a paranormal entity. That's the only thing I really knew about it, though, and that it had burned down since then. So it was really interesting getting to do a little bit more research on it and found some very interesting stuff. So we're kind of splitting this into 3 sections. So I'm going to talk about the kind of beginning and the first family who lived there. Then I'll pass it on to Megan. I wanted to talk about a couple interesting sources first that I found. One, and I'll talk about this later, but the paranormal investigators of Milwaukee actually did a investigation there fairly recently in 2019, which we'll talk about kind of at the end of the episode. So their blog post was really interesting. And then a couple interesting sources for photos, because it's kind of hard to find good photos of Summerwind. But the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel online had some good pictures of it actually burning, which I had never seen before. And then there was this forum called the Chicago Garage that had some really interesting photos of the ruins, like more recently. So I thought that was cool too. And then I wanted to give a special shout out to this blog that I found called Summerwindmansion.blogspot.com. This is someone who they put this whole blog out in 2013, but they were really dedicated to finding like very more credible resources when it comes to Summerwind and the history of it. And I really appreciated, like, they put kind of everything into one blog. It had like newspaper clips and really interesting photos and all the stuff in it, which I really appreciated, because it's kind of hard to find sources that are not from like, spookystories.com, and it's just like the same stuff over and over again. So
exactly.
So I really appreciated like the more credible stuff that they were adding to their blog. So shout out to them as well. I don't know if they're still interested in Summerwind. Like I said, it was 2013, but it was very helpful. So let's start by talking about the history of Summerwind. So formerly known as the Lamont Mansion, it's located on the shores of West Bay Lake in Vilas County in Wisconsin. It is very up north. Literally, if you look at where it's located, you could like throw a rock to Michigan, like the Upper Peninsula. It's pretty much as far north as you can get in Wisconsin. And it wasn't known as Summerwind. I thought that was kind of interesting. It wasn't known as Summerwind until a book called The Carver Effect came out much later in 1979, which I know that Megan will be mentioning too. And I think we'll come back to this book. But the locals have actually always known of it as the Lamont Mansion. Even still to this day, that's how they refer to it. Before it became a mansion, it was said to be a fishing lodge located on 80 acres of land. I couldn't really find a source for this. This is kind of what it says everywhere, like in Wikipedia and everything, but I couldn't find like where that specific piece of information came from. But it's pretty well, or it's pretty accepted that Robert Lamont purchased the land in 1916, all 80 acres of it, and then had it converted to a summer home for his family. So Robert Lamont was actually the Secretary of Commerce who served under Herbert Hoover, President Hoover. And his wife was named Helen, and they had 3 kids, one son, Robert Lamont Jr., and then 2 daughters, Gertrude and Dorothy. So they were kind of living in DC for the most part at this time when they bought the mansion, they turned it into a mansion. And then this was kind of meant to be their summer home. The mansion is located in a very isolated area, kind of like I said, especially at the time. It was very hard to reach due to road conditions and very heavy snowfall. As we know, I mean, it snows a lot even where we are, and this is way more north, and we know that winter kind of lasts from like November until April. So for the most part, it was very difficult for people to get to. So I think it's kind of important to remember that this was a very remote location. So as people kind of have these experiences moving forward in these stories, like how much of it could maybe be attributed to a little bit of psychosis because things are, they're not anywhere near anyone else up there. So kind of interesting. A little bit about the layout. So it's kind of hard to find. I was hoping to find like a floor plan or something. And I did read somewhere that Fox Valley Paranormal Investigators actually have access to the original floor plans, but I couldn't find them online. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. And if they do have those, it's kind of interesting that they wouldn't publish them because that would be really cool to see.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but so I was kind of just trying to piece some stuff together from different sources that I could find. So there was a newspaper article in the Milwaukee Journal in 1985. This I actually found from that blog I mentioned earlier. And a quote from that was that Summerwind was once a gracious home with elegant mahogany and silk furniture that hosted Hoover and President Warren G. Harding.
Wow.
Which I thought was interesting because I couldn't find any other sources that said that Hoover had ever been there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but it's mentioned it like so casually in this newspaper article that I was like, well, maybe it's true then. I don't know why they would report on it if it wasn't, but
right.
Kind of cool to think that one of the presidents had maybe been there. And then Summerwind, apparently, according to the same article, had 20 rooms, which is interesting because if you look at a lot of the more popular pictures of it, I always would look at them and be like, is it a mansion? Because it just kind of looks like a rundown old house, like before it burned down.
Right.
But I did find a couple photos of the mansion that, as you can see it from the lake, and it looks gigantic. Like it's a much different, it's a much different experience when you see it from that angle. So in that regard, I was like, okay, I could see where it would have 20 rooms because I was a little bit confused by that for a bit. But the mansion faces the lake, and it used to have a dock for boats. The master bedroom is above the kitchen and face the driveway. It had 3 large chimneys, which are at this point the only parts of the structure that are still standing. Actually, only 2 of them, not all 3 of them. Mm-hmm. And it also had a guest quarters and a large basement. And there was a kind of separate building off to the side where the servants and caretakers lived. So apparently, also, I found the mansion had no electricity for at least the majority of the time. Yeah, that the Lamonts lived there. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I read that the first home with electricity that was in the area, the Land O'Lakes area, was not built until 1922. So this was before that. And I'm not sure. I'm assuming at some point they had electricity installed, but I couldn't find at what point that happened. So yeah, so while the Lamonts were there, they were pretty much living by like candlelight, which is interesting.
Just really quickly, when I don't know if you ever had to do this when the power's been out for a while and you're walking with a candle down the hall. Imagine this huge mansion. All you see is the candlelight, because that's something, you got to remember. It's not like modern day houses that were built with like a lot of windows and so let in natural light. You might have one window in the living room, right?
Right.
And you're walking up the stairs and you see this light coming towards you and this shadowy figure. Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah, super creepy. That's like the stuff horror movies are made of, I feel like. And then you feel like you can't leave because everything is just covered in 2 feet of snow. So
you're stuck.
Yeah. Really interesting.
Stay in bed at that point.
Right? Yeah.
Pull the covers
not getting up.
Yeah.
Put the covers over your head. There you go.
So, let's talk about the alleged haunting of the Lamonts. So, supposedly, according to the legend, the servants who lived on the premises would see a ghostly phantom of a woman walking around the grounds. But at the time that they started saying this, Robert did not believe them. However, one night in the mid-1930s, while he and his wife were eating dessert in the kitchen, they heard the door to the basement opening and kind of like shaking. Very spooky.
That's what they heard.
Yeah, that's what they heard. That's for sure what they heard. So Robert, wanting to protect his family because he has his 3 kids there too, remember, he grabbed a gun and he headed to the door where he, according to legend, saw someone and took 2 shots and then the person disappeared. So he shot at a ghost. And interestingly, these bullet holes were supposedly found later on after the Lamonts moved out. So they thought that this was like a solid story. I did actually find 2 photos of the supposed bullet holes taken by a member of the Wausau Paranormal Research Society in 1987. But I couldn't find any other photos of these alleged bullet holes. And even the pictures on the Wausau Paranormal Research Society website were like it was like, yeah, maybe that could be bullet holes, but it also could have been someone like stabbing the door with a screwdriver. Like, this is much later, so I think the wood was very not very intact anymore. So I don't know. It's like it could be bullet holes, but also I don't know if we can really clarify that. But after this incident, again, according to the legend, the Lamont supposedly fled the house pretty much immediately and they never returned. However, I want to say I could not find anything regarding, first of all, when this happened. So most sources say the mid-1930s. There's nothing even remotely like exact. Like there is no like specific date or even year that can be attributed to this incident happening.
Yeah.
And I'm questioning, and I think Megan might talk about this guy, but Carl is actually the brother of someone who owned the mansion a little later on. I think it's Ginger Hinshaw. So her brother Carl actually claimed that he, while he was visiting, smelled gunpowder and went downstairs and actually saw like a ghost apparition of Mr. Lamont shooting at nothing. Yeah. So he said that this happened and then he saw the bullet holes. So that's what he assumed had transpired. But I don't know if like that's where the original story came from and no one ever really, because I couldn't find anything about Robert Lamont ever having like publicly said that he had seen a ghost, any information that they had for sure fled the building. And I even looked into like the 3 kids to see if they had ever made any statement about the mansion being haunted, but I couldn't find anything from any of the 3 of them either. So it's really interesting. It seemed like this whole story about the Lamont's family it wasn't really public knowledge until after Carl had like talked about it, which I just thought was kind of interesting.
So I have a quick theory. This is the way my mind works. You know how people in the 1900s were all pale and stuff like that, and wear these creepy long night gowns and everything like that?
Yeah.
Imagine if it was like Cousin Billy.
Oh no!
Right?
And he's all pale and everything. He didn't tell them they were coming, or they didn't know he was there because it's a huge mansion. And Lamont just shot him.
Right? And then he covered it up by saying, "Oh,
covered
it was
it
a
up
ghost."
Right? Since there's
My
no what
bad.
you're seeing, yeah, there's no evidence. There's no there's not really anything you can point to, like, oh, someone died during construction.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's the thing too, is it's like why was this place even haunted? Because it
Exactly.
wasn't built on any kind of like, Native American burial grounds or anything like they sometimes say. There was no one who died there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I later on, again, I think Megan might talk about this too, so I don't want to talk too much about it, but I think the claim was that Jeremy Carver, I think it's Jeremy, like an old explorer, was actually haunting the building because he had apparently had claim to the land. Like there was a deed saying that he should have owned this land. And that existed somewhere in Summerwind in some kind of black box, and he haunted the mansion because he was mad that he didn't have access to this land or whatever. But yeah, even that, well, we can talk about it later, but supposedly Jeremy Carver actually never explored that far north in Wisconsin, and also he wasn't even buried in the United States at all. So why would his ghost be there?
But yeah, a little suspicious.
Yeah, a little odd. Yeah. One other thing, I thought this was funny. So that blog that I was talking about, this is a quote from that person who did tons of research on the mansion over time, and they specifically said in the blog, "I'm having a great difficulty finding anything related to the mansion during the period from 1916 to 1930 or so. I would like to find a source which mentions the quote unquote kitchen shooting, as I can't understand where this information has originated from."
Right.
And I was like, yeah, same. I also cannot find anything. So kind of interesting. But moving on, the mansion apparently laid vacant for a long time after the Lamonts supposedly fled the property. So the Lamonts, according to most sources, say they owned the property until 1948 when Robert Lamont actually passed away, and that they hadn't entered it again for pretty much like 2 decades. From,
oh gosh.
Wow.
Yeah, so like from the, I don't know, 1930 to 1950-ish, it pretty much no one was there. But something that I thought was interesting was that, so that's like the kind of story, again, that you see in everything, like Haunted Wisconsin books, haunted this, haunted that. But when I read an article from the Milwaukee Journal in 1985, again, this was from that blog, and this was a published news article, they had actually interviewed this woman named Caroline Ashby, who was from the Land O'Lakes area, and she said that her family actually owned the mansion just before World War II, so the early 40s. And that she stayed there as a kid, and at the time, no one actually considered the mansion haunted. And at that time, the mansion was already in disrepair and infested with bats, according to her. So
that's sad.
It's sad that it kind of like went, I don't know, kind of became so dilapidated so quickly. But also interesting that like, apparently, most people think that the Lamonts owned it until 1948, but apparently there was a whole other family living there for a couple of years that no one even really knew about or no one talks about. Another person in the same article named Jerry E. Sparks, he said that he actually lived there with his dad, who was the caretaker for the mansion in the 1930s. And they lived in the kind of the side house for the servants and caretakers. And he also said that he didn't remember the mansion being haunted or anyone talking about the mansion being haunted either. Another resident, Gene Newth, so this is more recent as well, he said that people started saying the mansion was haunted only after it was abandoned, and no one said that while it was occupied. So one thing I'll say, I just wanted to throw this in there, but this place had so many friggin' owners. Like people would apparently put a down payment down and then they would just ditch it. And even as late as 1985, people like didn't know who actually owned it, and they were like, hey, we want to burn this place down, but like who even owns this property? They had to like track down the people. So it was really interesting, just how much this place was kind of passed around. So I think that kind of like, lends itself to the haunted thing too, is like people didn't want to keep it, they didn't want to stay there. But eventually, in 1948, Summerwind was purchased and kept by Lillian Kiefer and her husband. So they had the mansion kind of in there, or they owned it for a long time. They never lived there on a permanent basis, which a lot of people kind of say was more evidence to it being haunted. But knowing that in the early 1940s, it was already infested with bats, I'm kind of like, I understand why they wouldn't want to live there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some reports say that Miss Kiefer said she never felt safe at the property, so she left the mansion and left all of her belongings there, telling neighbors that they could take whatever they wanted, but that she wouldn't be held responsible if something bad happened to them. Kind of interesting.
Nice.
Yeah. And then that same article from earlier also did mention one neighbor who did kind of have a paranormal experience. So when she was visiting Mrs. Kiefer right after they had purchased the mansion, she said she saw a big army overcoat laying on a bed. And then later, like an hour later, she passed by the same room and it was just her and Mrs. Kiefer, and Mrs. Kiefer hadn't been in there, that the coat had actually disappeared, and it freaked her out enough that she never went back.
Wow.
So she did have kind of a weird experience there.
Yeah.
So anyway, after Mr. Kiefer died, Mrs. Kiefer actually divided the land up and sold everything. So remember, it was 80 acres of land. So they sold a bunch of different lots, and the land, I guess, that had Summerwind on it kept being diverted back to Mrs. Kiefer because people couldn't keep up with the payments. So that's kind of why another reason why it got tossed around a lot. But it eventually did get purchased, though, by the Hinshaw family. And now I will pass it off to Megan, who's going to talk about that.
All right. Thanks, Brooke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was really super interesting. And I'm still going with my cousin Billy's story that killed him.
Yeah.
And they left.
I think that's reasonable.
Okay. All right. Megan.
All right.
I'd love to hear your part now.
Sounds good. All right. In 1969, the Hinshaw family actually purchased Summerwind. So they're the next family that owned it. And they only stayed there for 6 months, which is an extremely short period of time. But I do understand why they ended up leaving, because they experienced some of the craziest, most intense paranormal activity that has ever really been reported in the mansion. And I'm going to talk about that today.
Nice.
So in this family, there were 8 people. There was Arnold, the father, Ginger, the mother, and then they had 6 children. So you would think this is like the perfect place to raise a nice big family. No, I'll go over that. It was a complete nightmare for them. Even when they moved in, like immediately there were red flags. Like when Ginger first saw the mansion, the first thing that she said when she saw it was, "I feel in love with this house in the most awful way." Isn't that such like an interesting thing to say?
Yeah. That is an interesting thing to say.
Yeah, even she had like weird vibes about it before she even really moved in. And even after the family moved in, they started experiencing these really crazy, unexplained paranormal happenings. So all the members of the family started seeing these vague shapes. They saw shadows, they saw full body apparitions. And the most spooky of those apparitions was this one woman who would float back and forth between the French doors by their dining room. Another weird thing that happened was they would report that they would smell perfume in the air.
Oh boy.
Yeah, just out of nowhere. Maybe it was the perfume of that woman who was floating back and forth on the French door.
That does happen.
Maybe.
That does happen. That is reported.
Yeah. And another interesting thing I read is that they would hear these mumbled voices going on, but when they would walk in the room to see what was happening, the voices would just stop. It's like very interesting.
Yeah.
Another thing they reported is that the lights would go on and off by themselves. So they must have had electricity at that time. So it'd be interesting to research when the house did get electricity. But another super interesting thing that I learned is that some of the rooms in the house would feel freezing, even in the summer. And for people who are familiar with Wisconsin summers do get pretty hot. Yes. So having, ice cold rooms is very odd.
Very odd.
So of course the family, they wanted this to be their dream house, and they thought, maybe we're just imagining things, but more things started to happen, like appliances would break down, and then they'd call a repair person, but then it would magically repair itself before the service person came.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, windows and doors were opening and closing by themselves, and one time, this one window, it kept opening and closing, and it was driving Arnold, the father, completely nuts. So he took this heavy nail and he nailed it into the window and shut it because he's like, we're done with this. So he
Right,
nailed
yeah.
it shut, and it finally stayed closed. But there's just that one window that would open by itself, and it was driving him nuts. So the Hinshaws, they were super determined to make this historical house work for them, despite all of these strange things occurring. And I mean, this was their dream house. They wanted to make it work and raise their family in it. But what they really struggled with was they tried to hire workers to come in and fix up the place, but nobody would stay and work on the house. People would just straight refuse to work on it, which is interesting. Like renovators would just leave halfway through the projects, and some of them claimed, we just won't work on this house. There's too many bizarre things going on. And some of them even went so far as to fake being sick so that they wouldn't have to show up to work.
I'm sick, I can't make it.
Yeah, they were desperate not to work on the house. So finally the Hinshaws were like, screw it. We're just going to do this housework ourselves. We don't have to hire anybody.
Well, that's a good idea.
Yeah, but this is one of the craziest stories that I was able to find from Summerwind. One day, Arnold was painting this closet in one of the bedrooms, and in the closet, there was this large shoe drawer that was installed in the back of the closet. And Arnold decided, I'm going to pull it out so that I can paint behind it. But when he pulled it out, he saw that there was this dark space behind the drawer. So he was like, what was this? Didn't see it before. Right? He had to go investigate it. So he has his wife, Ginger, bring him a flashlight, and he takes a look. And the second he looks in there, he jumps. And he's completely disgusted because he sees something furry in there. And he thought maybe an animal had gotten in and died. But he couldn't quite see what it was. He was just too big to squeeze into the space.
Yeah, no kidding.
So what any dad would do, he recruits his daughter, Mary,
to
go in. He's like, get the daughter to do it. Who knows what it is?
Yeah, honey.
So they tell the daughter, all right, come here and we'll take a look at what's inside the closet. So Mary, the daughter, she grabs the flashlight and she crawls inside this little dark space. But moments later, she lets out this big scream, and she found what the legend says appeared to be a human corpse. What Mary pulled out of the closet was what she says appeared to be a human skull with black hair still on it.
Oh.
Very suspicious.
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to ask you two about is the Hinshaw family never called the police about this supposed skull that they found, which is a little bit suspicious. So why they never called the authorities, not sure why. Was the story concocted to fit, those scary stories of Summerwind, or was this a real body that was the result of a crime that took place?
Yeah, that's interesting too. That the mansion was pretty much not used, or it was pretty much vacant for decades before they moved there. So it's like, if it was behind a wall, wouldn't it have happened during the construction? Which I don't know. It's just the timing of it is a little odd, because I feel like if the skull has hair still connected to it, that implies that it's kind of more recent, because otherwise it would have all deteriorated. So I don't know if I buy it.
So one thing, I don't know if you hear any news stories about this, but some people will try to break into homes, or they'll do like a Santa Claus and they'll try to go through the chimney and get stuck.
Right.
I don't know if that's
I have heard about that.
But some people will try to go through the walls to get in because they don't want to be seen because they're robbing the place. So
that's true.
What's weird though, you're exactly right, Megan. Why wouldn't they call the police? Because I'd be like, hey, I don't want you guys, someone buys this house and then they find the body or whatever, we hide it, and then people think we did it. No,
Yeah, that's
right.
That's
Yeah,
one
you
thing that
call the
occurred
police.
to me. If you find this corpse in the house, it's like, all these haunted happenings have been happening. Maybe we should put
Yeah,
this corpse to rest and
right.
bury it in the
Yeah.
ground.
Hey,
Maybe that would have fixed
hey,
things. So
hey, just side note, when was this? This was the 80s or
this
60s?
was the 60s.
Okay,
Or
so
oh
they
no,
didn't have DNA. They
it
didn't
was the
have any DNA.
70s, pardon me.
Oh, 70s. Yeah. So they still didn't have any DNA evidence that they could take this thing and, you know what I'm saying? Like in modern
Yeah.
day where you could do a DNA and then be like, oh, hey, it's, whoever, or, we found this person. Yeah, but it's still, why wouldn't you call the police? That makes no sense.
Yeah,
I
that
will
is odd.
I'll also talk about this later. They go back and they check to see if it's still there, and I'll
Yeah.
tell you what happens later on. But it's
Ooh.
just interesting that they saw the corpse and they just put it right back
Yeah.
in. They're like,
Just,
out of sight, out of mind.
hey,
Yeah.
hey, honey, just put that right back in there if you could. Yeah,
Don't worry
thanks.
about it.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Good night, hon. Sweet dreams.
Sweet night. Actually, John, this is where things start to get a lot crazier because after they found this supposed skull in the closet, things just took a turn for the worst. Quite frankly, Arnold, the father, he just completely lost his shit. He started staying up late at night and he was playing this Hammond organ that the couple had purchased before moving into the house. And now, if you take a step back, playing the organ and the piano was something that he really loved doing. He used to play it, for fun. Yes. Love
the
it,
sound
John.
effect.
But this time, just like that music recording, his music was completely frenzied and he'd play it really loud throughout the night. So, mind you, he's staying up all night playing the organ, not letting anybody sleep. And this is disturbing Ginger, his wife. She's begging him to stop. Please come to bed.
Yeah,
But
right.
the interesting thing is Arnold told Ginger, if I stop playing, something bad is going to happen. The demons in my head are telling me to keep playing. That's why I have to keep playing. And
Oh
she's
man.
completely frightened that he's just going off the rails. Sometimes Ginger would get all of the children together in a single room and they all sleep together because they're completely afraid of their deranged father staying up all night playing the organ long into the night.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
That's
So-
crazy. Oof.
Yeah, Arnold, he suffered a complete mental breakdown. He's getting angry, he's withdrawn, he's emotionless, he stops showing up to his job. So he eventually loses his job. He's not paying the bills. He's sleeping all day. He's staying up playing the organ all night. It just was completely out of control.
Wow.
And there was this one interesting story that I found. He's completely off the rails. And one day he was under the impression that one of his daughters had hidden his hammer when they didn't. And so what he did in his mind, he's like, okay, how we're going to fix this? He went out and he found the daughter's pet raccoon and he killed it as a punishment.
God.
And
That's so mean.
Yeah, what I found is he did it to quote prove a point. That's what he said.
Prove a point.
Really sad.
Yeah. Worst dad ever.
Yeah, you can see why Ginger, she's like completely beside herself. Some accounts even say that she even contemplated committing suicide in the Summerwind Mansion. So the stress was just too much for her. And so she ended up sending Arnold away for treatment, which is probably the best thing for him.
The best thing, yeah.
Yeah, Ginger and the children, they ended up moving to Granton, Wisconsin with Ginger's parents. So Ginger and Arnold did end up getting a divorce, and Ginger remarried to a man named George, who will come into the story later.
Okay.
Interesting.
So Ginger, she's completely terrified of this house. They don't live there anymore. But a few years later, Ginger's father, his name is Raymond von Bobber. I believe that's how you say his name.
I love that name.
Von Bobber, yes.
Von Bobber.
So Ginger's father, he announces his plans. I'm going to turn Summerwind into a bed and breakfast. I'm going to breathe new life into it. Like, that makes sense. It's completely haunted, but let's make it into attraction, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, okay.
he thought that this mansion would attract guests to its super scenic location and they'd love it and it would be a great business opportunity. And
Mm,
keep in mind, at this time, he had no idea that Ginger and her family had been completely terrified in this
yeah.
house. So
Oh
he's
my
like, yeah, let's buy it. Let's renovate it.
what the heck?
Ginger is begging him, please don't buy Summerwind. It's not worth it. Don't do it. But Raymond, he does it anyways.
Of course.
He he even acknowledged, like, okay, yeah, maybe this place is haunted, but I don't really care. So so he actually, like Brooke mentioned earlier, he claimed that he thought that he knew who the identity of the ghost haunting the place was, and it was a man named Jonathan Carver.
Jonathan
right.
Carver.
Yes,
I said Jeremy earlier.
Jonathan Carver. He's an 18th century British explorer, and Raymond claimed that he might have been haunting Summerwind because he was looking for like some sort of deed that was hidden within the house. So that was his theory, and he even wrote a book on it. It's called The Carver Effect, which came out in 1979. And I actually went on Amazon to see if I could find it. And there is a hardcover selling for $300, and it's very difficult to find. So
I saw that.
Okay,
That's crazy.
all right.
yeah, it is not currently in print, so it's really hard to find. But
Yeah.
the funny thing is that he wrote this book and none of the locals took him seriously. They thought that this was some like shit he was making up to,
Sure.
make money off of. So like Brooke was
Yeah.
saying, it's like some stories in this whole thing is like there's some stretching of truth and people not believing, and
Yeah.
it's kind of up
Well,
to you to decide what you believe.
exactly.
One other thing too that I read about this period of time and why the locals didn't believe him was that I guess the Von Bobers or whatever, like Raymond and his wife, never even like went into the mansion. They lived like in a camper on the premises, but they didn't like go into it at all. So they were like, how would he even know that this place is like supposedly haunted? Like he just kind of seemed like he was making it up for clout a little bit.
It's interesting. So again, a lot of these stories are just alleged accounts. So yeah. Anyways, so Raymond decides he's going to buy Summerwind, and one day his son Carl, his daughter Ginger, and Ginger's new husband George, they all went exploring the house. And George actually spots that same closet that I was talking about, allegedly with the skull in it. And so Carl climbs into the space and he takes a look around and it's empty. It's like, what happened here? It's like, was the skull ever real? Was it removed? Was it removed by a person? Was it never there at all? So it's not quite sure what happened there.
Yeah, I mean, if you think someone would remove it,
yeah,
I don't know, maybe
interesting.
What would be super creepy if the dad came back and like grabbed it out of there, like
It'd be crazy.
Yeah, again, that's just too weird. Like, if Arnold just said, hey, I gotta get that out of there, and went back and got it, and then it's like my bunk bed from hell. Where's the body?
Never know. Never found out who it was, if it even existed.
That's freaky.
Right.
Oh man, I love it.
Anyways, so the plans to turn this mansion into a bed and breakfast, you can guess it, did not go very smoothly. Work did not stay on the job. They were complaining that their tools were going missing. They thought they were being watched. And the funny thing is that Marie, who is Raymond's wife, also agreed with their complaints. And she's like, I can't be in this house. Like, I feel like I'm being followed everywhere I go. So everyone's just completely uncomfortable in this house. So you can kind of sense this reoccurring theme going on. But one of the disturbances that I thought was the most crazy out of all of the stories that I've read is that apparently the rooms in the house would change sizes. So it was impossible to measure them.
Wow.
Because the construction crews would measure them, and then the next day they'd be a completely different size. Like this one point, Raymond estimated that he could put a restaurant within Summerwind that would seat 150 people. But then when he compared it to the original blueprints of Summerwind, he realized that the same space would only fit half as many people. So
Huh.
not sure what is occurring with that, but the changing of the room sizes, it drove the construction crews crazy. They didn't want to work on it. It was too much work to keep remeasuring. Another interesting thing I found is that they would take photographs of the house with the same camera, only a few seconds apart, and there would be variations between the photos, which is interesting. Like one time, Raymond took a photo of the living room and compared it with one that Ginger had taken when they lived there. In Ginger's photo, it showed these curtains that were hanging up on the windows, and she had taken them down when they moved out. But Raymond's photo, years later, showed the same curtains in that photo, even though they weren't hung up. So it's like, how is that possible?
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
So all these things are going on, and this is funny, but Life magazine gets wind of the story. Haha. Funny pun there.
Pardon pun.
Life magazine finds out about Summerwind, and the mansion actually makes the top 9 most haunted locations in the US. They write an article about it. And as you can imagine, the feature got a ton of attention. And it wasn't long where people were, flocking to the house. They wanted to check it out, thrill seekers and teenagers wanting to throw parties in there. And the increased traffic that came to the property just completely put Summerwind into ruin, because no one was really living there or maintaining it. And that's kind of the start of the demise to the whole building.
Right.
That is amazing, Brooke and Megan. I just so much. There's alleged stuff, but it's just so creepy. All the things that they found, and it's really interesting to me that Life magazine came out and did a story on it. I think that's interesting, and just all the owners going back and forth and who owns it and who doesn't own it. That's really strange.
I do want to say regarding, so I wanted to mention this towards the end, but I feel like it makes sense here.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was curious about like the timing of everything, because I read that book, The Carver Effect, came out in 1979, and that the Life magazine feature just happened to be a year later. And I, out of curiosity, looked up when the Amityville horror novel came out, and it actually came out in 1977. So 2 years before The Carver Effect. So we can discuss this more later, but I just find the timing kind of interesting, because to me, as the Hinshaw family and like the Von Bober family, Raymond being Ginger's dad, like, wouldn't it make sense if like, let's say your daughter purchased this property that maybe was in disrepair and they were having troubles renovating it and they were losing money on it. Well, how about let's tell the story about how Ginger's husband went crazy and did all these crazy things, and put it out as a story about this haunting, and then get people to come there and buy the book and be really interested in it. And then all of a sudden you're making money off of this whole story. And, it's all about how your family was kind of like the heroes in the situation. I just find it interesting, I will say. So
absolutely.
Because it seems like all of the legitimate stories of hauntings, like all the actual like first person cases came from this one family. Like everyone else was like, yeah, we didn't think it was haunted, yada, yada, yada. And everything kind of stems from the Hinshaws / Von Bobers, whatever. I just think it's kind of odd that like everything would only come from that one group. But yeah, we can talk about that a little bit more.
We'll bring that up and everything.
Yeah.
Love it. I'm going to cover the 80s now to present. So in 1988, Summerwind was struck by lightning twice. Now, what I think is really interesting about that is, like, that's really strange to me that I got struck twice, because usually lightning, and now I'm going to be a science nerd, usually lightning will strike the highest point on top of a hill. So that's why they say if it's a thunderstorm, you don't go running up a hill and stand by a tree.
Right.
Or you're fried. your KFC chicken.
Right.
No, you're supposed to go to the lowest point and stay there, and obviously stay away from any good conductors. But this is what I think happened, and there's no proof of this either. Like, this whole story is we can't wrap our hands around, right? And we can't say like, yes, this is it. And that's more interesting to me. So some allege that the mansion was deliberately set on fire to stop vandals and kids from entering what was still private property. So there's
Mhm.
an article here that was really interesting. Thank you, Megan, or Brooke, whoever put it up. I believe Megan, you put it up.
It was Megan, yeah.
Awesome, because it kind of talks about and I was reading this too, and I'm going to go through it really quickly. I found this thing I thought was super funny. So the Land O'Lakes town board, they have like totally denied, like, nope, this is not, we didn't do this. It was destroyed by a fire. But according to this, like, the fire department was like, let it burn. Yeah,
Right.
That's so bad.
whatever. Yeah, okay. And they're really defensive about it. So there's an article you can read from Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and they're really defensive. I won't get into the full
Mhm.
article because it's typical political BS. Like, oh, we didn't do this, and what are you talking about? We didn't torch the place, and they talk to the law enforcement and fire department there, and they're all like, no, it's just, it was destroyed, with the lightning strike, and how dare you say that we burned it down. Um,
Hmm.
Funny. And then I think we talked about this already, the Fox Valley ghost hunters, you know, um, who kind of talk about that a little bit too. They're a little skeptical of the explanation of what happened. So
Right.
I guess, I mean, what do you think? Would it make sense to burn it down? Yes and no, right? Kind of just like, you don't want vandals there. You're sick and tired of people going there. It's private property, so maybe you just light a match, right? I don't know.
Oops.
Yeah, I think too, like, they had so many issues with people coming in because they wanted to see the mansion because it was haunted,
Right.
they wanted to explore it, and it was very hard to find, so people would just, like, wander around up there,
Yeah.
like, looking for it and be, like, bothering the locals, and I feel like it was just
Yeah.
very annoying for all of them to be
Yeah.
like, "Okay, like, just leave us alone," you know?
So
And
burn it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
that
So, Megan,
I
you want to say
I
something?
kind of agree with you, Brooke. Like, I feel like the mansion was also more of a, thorn in their side than anything. It's like, God,
Yeah.
I wish this just wasn't a thing anymore. Because with all that traffic coming in and, people getting on private property, it's like, oh God, this is just
Yeah.
getting in the way.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
I agree. So they made a fund, and I'm not even going to give into the fund because I don't want anybody sending your money to this. I'm not going to include the link because it's a dead link. Well, it's not a dead link. It still goes as something, but it was very suspicious to me. So please, people, don't give money. Keep your money. It's Christmas. Buy a gift for somebody. Um, but one of the things is they wanted to restore Summerwind, okay, and they wanted to restore it to its former glory. So I have a friend of the family who's in construction, and he told me that it would take millions to restore.
Mhm.
I think I told you, Megan and Brooke, anywhere from $4 to $10 million, maybe more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Really expensive.
yeah, it's not pocket change. It's a lot of money. Um,
Yeah, to just
and he
crowdfund.
also he was a skeptic, which is fine because we love skeptics. We love talking
Ooh,
to
just kidding.
you. Yeah, but it's nice to talk to one, kind of try to convince them. That's why we're here. But he said he thinks no one would take the job because of the legend. And I kind of laughed at that. And he said, I asked him what he would. And he was like, no, it's too much work. And it's just, he goes, you're just going to, it just wouldn't go anywhere. That's his kind of feeling was. But he did agree with me that a lot of people would not take it
Yeah.
because because of the stories. So he says a lot of guys in construction are not skeptics. So that was interesting.
That is
So my other
interesting.
personal
It
story
is.
about Summerwind is my good friend. He goes on a road trip. He takes a motorcycle and he kind of goes around the country and stuff like that. So I told him about Summerwind. Hey, when you're up north, could you go to Summerwind and check it out and take some pictures? And he said, this is probably, I don't know, 5-6 years back. So not too long. And he said, sure. So when he was going back to Summerwind, you have to take like an all-terrain vehicle or a motorcycle. You can't go back with a car. Maybe an SUV. It's too overgrown. Anyway, so he gets back there and he's there for, I think he said a few minutes, and this sheriff comes out of nowhere and says, you need to get off right now. You need to leave. And my buddy's like, hey, okay. And the guy was like adamant, like, you need to leave right now. So he goes out, and the cop follows him. And he said that it wasn't like the cop was being super mean to him. It seemed like the cop was like, looked legitimately frightened. He said it, just the look on the cop's face, even though he said it was like, it's private property and you can't go back there, we'll fine you. He said the cop looked scared. And he said for a cop to look scared who's probably worked years in this area, that's pretty interesting. Of course, unfortunately, he didn't ask any questions to the cop. And he said, I just wanted to get out of there so I didn't get a ticket.
Fair enough.
Right. Fair enough. So he said it was really interesting. He didn't feel any vibes. He didn't feel anything. But he said where that cop came from to this day, he has no idea. It was like he was there a few minutes. And
that is interesting.
Comes barreling in and tells him to get off right now. So anyway.
Yeah. I suppose if you're a cop in the Land O'Lakes area, maybe you don't have a ton of other stuff to do, but it's just, but still, that's odd timing.
Yeah, it was just strange because, again, when you go back there, no one can see you off the road. Like, nobody. Right. As soon as you get into it, it's not like someone drives past and go, hey, I can see you. No, you can't. So,
I can't imagine that there's a driveway, a perfectly, manicured driveway going up. There's
absolutely
a little, sign on the road, like Summerwind this way.
Yes,
like,
right. Yeah.
Like, I'm sure it's really hard to find. So what are the odds that this police officer just found your friend just in the right spot at the right time?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just a quick side note, my friend had to ask a local in order to how to get there and stuff like that. It's on Google Maps, but it's not on Google Maps, if you know what I mean. I mean, it's
it's not exact at all, I think. Yeah. And you get probably like terrible reception up there. I know a lot of people on like the forums I was reading who have tried to find it say that there's like written instructions on how to find it, but even those that are like not easy to follow, and it's just very difficult to find. And you kind of have to park somewhere if you're driving a car and then like trek back into the woods until you find like the chimneys that are still standing. And
yeah. So last but not least, so that was the 80s to the present. So there's not been really much done to it. Yes, people tried to restore it. And yes, there's been stories from here, but nothing really concrete or like, I've never heard some stories about kids who partied there and they saw a ghost. Maybe if we revisit this topic down the road, we find something, we will definitely give it to you, our listeners, because we would love to hear that, obviously. So they made a Summerwind movie. It's on IMDb. It's not really a movie. It's kind of some cheesy thing that's on the Travel Channel kind of thing. But one of the things they had in the movie, which was really funny, that I've never seen, and please tell me if I skipped this or any one of us skipped it, there's a vortex. Summerwind.
Oh,
interesting.
I don't remember reading about that.
Yeah, so in the movie, again, I just went and I had a buddy of mine, he found it for me. But you got to get rid of the link. I don't want to get anybody into trouble. It's kind of a pirated link. Don't hear that from me.
I didn't hear anything.
Otherwise, you got to pay for it, which I'm not doing that.
Yeah, no one
So anyway, the guy opens the door and there was like a vortex when I was watching. And I was
God.
What? Where did that come from? There's like this vortex all of a sudden. So
I did not read about that.
Yeah, it's really cheesy. And the dad that they got playing the organ is like playing it like the Joker out of like some DC movie or something. Like super over the top.
Oh my God.
I'm going to spare both of you and you can say thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. We appreciate it.
It's not scary at all. It's super lame. So, but here's the thing. They have not made a Summerwind movie. Okay, and here's my pitch, Hollywood. We get Margot Robbie and Christian Bale. They're good
Ooh.
actors. Why not? Right?
Yeah.
Let's
Sounds
put
good to
them in
me.
there. Arnold
I think
and
yeah.
yeah, come on.
I think it'd be a good movie. I mean, regardless of whether you think everything's true or not, I think it would. It kind of has like Haunting of Hill House vibes to me a little
Right.
bit.
It really
Yeah.
does.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, like a family buys an old mansion, they're trying to restore it, all the
Mhm.
spooky stuff keeps happening, the dad kind of goes crazy, they leave in the middle of the night. It's very, very similar, but I think
Yeah,
that would be
I know
fun.
it's similar to that, but it's I think if you had the history, if you saw
Yeah.
it with the Lamont
And the
and
setting
the
I think is unique
setting,
for sure.
so that's my pitch to Hollywood.
Yeah, I think it's a good pitch. I think they should take it.
Yeah, I'll buy a ticket.
So that's it
Yeah.
for me about again 80s to present. Move on here to Brooke about a paranormal
Yeah.
investigation.
I wanted to just quickly talk about this because I thought it was interesting. So the paranormal investigation team of Milwaukee, they did an investigation in 2019. So they had two members go out there and do an investigation of what's left of Summerwind. They acknowledge that the investigations are difficult, obviously, because there are no, I mean, it's all burned down. So it's just ruin and like rubble. So you can't really get like EVPs or electronic voice phenomena because there's, like wildlife everywhere. It's hard to know like what it would be like a voice versus like a squirrel or I don't know, something like that. But and they actually in their blog post, they kind of went through all of the biggest kind of the stuff that we had talked about, and they gave kind of what they thought were logical explanations for all of the past claims, which I appreciated that they did that. I like when people who do paranormal investigations like come at it with a skeptical mind, so I like that. But they were not able to document any haunted happenings during their stay, but they actually, this was the most interesting part to me. They interviewed a Summerwind neighbor who their nephew was staying there. And so at this point, the nephew is like a grown adult. He's probably, I'm not sure how old he is, but he's much older now. But he said that while they were in the area, he and his friends used to hang out there all the time back in like the 70s and 80s. And they would make up stories about the hauntings and like spread them around town, which I thought was kind of interesting. Yeah. And he also said that he and his friends would sneak into the house to scare trespassers and then never reveal themselves. So he said that they would try to like spook them and act like ghosts and stuff and to like scare them away. And according to him, Mrs. Kiefer was emotionally fragile. So she was the one who like bought the mansion after the Lamonts and supposedly left all of her stuff there. So that was according to him. He again seemed to be of the impression that Summerwind wasn't necessarily haunted. It was more, just kind of a lot of, I don't know. I guess on that note, we can kind of get into our like final thoughts and discussion, which is, do you think that Summerwind was haunted? So what do you guys think?
I will say a big no.
N-O.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same page. I think that like it had a lot of bad juju and a lot of interesting history, and it's very interesting to read about, but it seems like a story kind of gone out of hand.
Right.
All kind of stemming from this Raymond Bober guy.
Raymond.
And it just like, just kind of spiraled into something else, which I think is kind of similar to the Amityville Horror House. It's kind of interesting how many parallels there are.
Yeah. So it's funny you bring that up with the Lutzes who talked about this story. Now, remember, we will get to this, I think, later on. If you guys want to do it, I would like to do it because it's as confusing as this. Because people with the Lutzes, there was a story that came out later that it's completely fake. They made it up. But if you think about it, how did the Lutzes know this would become a phenomenon, right? Like, how would you know that you just say, hey, my place is scary and there's a demon that's telling me to get out and all this stuff, right? How did you know you become famous? And like Summerwind too, like when you kind of think about it, you're like, okay, why would you like say there's a body in the like crawl space or whatever that was, right?
Yeah, oddly specific.
For Summerwind,
Yeah.
I think it's more interesting that it happened so close to when the Amity horror novel came out,
Yeah.
like right after that, because
Yeah.
maybe they were trying to like imitate the success of
Could be.
that. But for
Yeah.
Amityville, I think it is interesting. In both cases, it's interesting because yeah, you're right. It's like, okay, maybe I'm gonna write this book, but no one ever reads it, and it
Yeah.
was just a total waste of time.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. I wish I could read that book, the Carver Effect one. I'm not gonna pay $300 for it
No,
though.
we'll do a Patreon. We'll do a Patreon once
Yeah.
we get some more episodes, and listeners, once we grow, that'd be a great Patreon to give to us, and we can have the book so you don't have to read it and
Yeah.
donate
Yeah,
to
we'll
us.
read it for you.
We'll
Because
read it for
because
Yeah,
I'm curious, like Megan, like your whole part, like how much of the stories that they told were actually like stories from the book, like how much
Right.
intersection was there, and were the like characters in the book
Mhm.
Ginger and Arnold, like were they named the same or were they based on them? I don't. It's just I am very curious as to how the two, like the real life stories and the stories from that book that Raymond wrote, like coincide with
He
each other.
also published the book under a pen name. So, and people, in the
Yeah.
city are like, "Oh, he's stretching the truth. He's making it up." So it's like, are we just taking your word for it?
Yeah, it's really seems like the people who
Mm.
live in the area are very much skeptical of the entire thing and kind of more so annoyed, which I think that is the one of the biggest things for me is that like of all these people
Yeah.
who live in the area are like,
Right.
no, it's all BS. Like this guy was just like a clout chaser. He never even lived in the house. He wouldn't even go inside of it.
But can I
Uh,
add something really quick that I think is
yeah.
really interesting? We'll do Mothman eventually, Brooke, because I know
Love
you were there
Mothman.
and you can take pictures and
Yes.
stuff. But they embraced it, right? Even though Mothman killed people.
hmm
You know what I'm saying? These not like people got murdered, or at least that we don't know. Why wouldn't you embrace this if you're in the Land O'Lakes area, which is a gorgeous area, right? Embrace it and
I
say, want to make money. Come
It
on,
is
come here."
interesting because yeah, same thing with the Hodag that we talked about the other week. Is
Right.
I feel like with like the cryptid stories, towns definitely kind of embrace it and turn it
Right.
into a tourism thing. I almost feel like with Summerwind, like I feel like they didn't like the Bobers or
Yeah.
Bobbers and the
Mhm.
Hinshaws. Like maybe they seem to be kind of like well off people that maybe were
Mm,
just trying
there
to
are
almost
well people there.
profit. Yeah, like they're profiting off of like the community more so than like trying to like help the community because
Mm,
I don't know,
I agree.
because also it's like how do you, I don't know, like how do you monetize that as like a, because with
Yeah,
the cryptids it's kind of easy, like you
right.
can sell little plushies and
Yeah,
you
you're
can
right.
do all these fun
Yeah,
little
have a
things.
pizza.
T-shirts.
Yeah.
Yeah, but with a burned down old haunted house there's
Yeah.
not really much you can do,
You-
so
So here's my pitch for all of us. Here's our business idea. Don't you steal our business idea out there. We're all
It's
gonna get
copyright.
together. We're gonna all get together and we're gonna make this like a spooky acres, and we're gonna have like a haunted place there. What do you guys think?
All right.
yeah,
Sounds
I
good to
think that would
me.
be so fun. Yeah, like the Screaming Acres haunted yes, I
Yeah,
would. I think that would be fun. And then it could like bring money to the community because then people would travel for like a good reason, not to like trespass, but just to have a good
exactly.
time.
There you go. I love it.
Yeah, I think that'd be fun.
Anything else on this topic? Anything that you kind
Oh,
of want to
the
talk?
one other thing I did want to ask was, do you guys think that the fire was actually caused by lightning? Because I don't. I think that
No.
they burned that down.
Well, one thing that I read that I thought was a little suspicious is there allegedly were lightning rods on the house. So it's like, why didn't the lightning rods
Right.
work
Yeah.
if it was
Yeah.
struck by lightning? It's like that's the whole point of having
Yep.
lightning rods on a wooden house.
I agree. And
Yeah.
another thing too is that I have a picture of this. I can send it to you, John, so you can add
Yes,
it to the
please.
site. But there's a picture of it burning like completely up in flames, and it's the middle of the day.
Hmm.
And it doesn't look like it was like storming or anything like that. So I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting. It seems like it was a controlled burn. To me, and that they did it on purpose. And there was also
Like it.
oddly, there was a news article from 1985 that
Yeah, I
said
saw
that. Yeah, and I said that they were planning on burning it down, but then they never did. I think because some people were like protesting and they didn't want it to be burned down, but then it just happened to accidentally burn down a couple years later, which seems like odd timing, right? Like,
well, and the fire department was like, eh.
Yeah, I said the fire department was like,
just
whatever.
let it go. Yeah, right.
Okay.
A little suspicious.
Ladies, this was awesome. I love Summerwind. This was a great episode. Amazing work from both of you.
Thanks.
Bunk Bed From Hell was awesome.
Yeah, we love Bunk Bed From Hell.
Let's sum up. Let's sum this up. I'm a no, but kind of like you might sway me if you had a little more like pictures of the lady and the gunshots. Brooke, yes or no?
I'm a no. I'm a no, but I do think that there's some odd juju. There's some some weirdness around it for sure. But I'm a no on the haunting and
Megan, you're the final one.
I'm also a little leaning towards no, just because I feel like mental health might have played a part in it. It's just something that people didn't really understand as well back in the day. So
I totally agree.
Some explanations for Arnold or Ginger's, she's trying to raise this family in this house and her husband's going crazy, and I think that could explain some of the phenomena that happened.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Absolutely. So great episode. Second episode, awesome. So we'll be back with our next topic. Now, one of the things I'm going to tell you, listeners, Brooke, Megan, and I, we kind of go feel what we want to do for next episode. So what we suggested is Beast of Bray Road and the Sister Hotel. We might change that because, like I said, we kind of go by feel of what we want to do. But believe me, whatever the next episode is, you're gonna love it. We want to go back to cryptids, I think. Is that right, Brooke? We want to do a cryptid one, you think?
I'm always about going back to cryptids.
Love it. Megan, what do you think? You like cryptids?
Sounds good to me.
What do you think of the hotel? Okay.
Brooke is passionate about those cryptids, so
I am. I love the Beast of Bray Road. Very fun stuff.
Yeah. So again, that's what's exciting about our podcast and everyone else's podcast. You don't know what's going to be next. So
you don't know what you're going to get. Exactly.
So, again, anything else to add there? Anything?
I think that says it all.
Keep it up with the soundboard, John. We love it.
Yeah.
We're going to keep doing that because I love playing around with it. So we always end the podcast with, hey, tell your ghost we say hi because, be friendly to your ghost and everything.
Yeah.
We will be back in a couple weeks. We love you all. Again, we're building this. So eventually we'll have emails and all that other good stuff. So for John signing off, Megan and Brooke.
Signing off. See you in a couple weeks.
All right. Thank you so much. We love you guys. Stay spooky.
Ooh.